The cloaking darkness of a humid August night was shattered by the piercing screams of Ellen Schutt. She had just discovered her precious 8-year-old daughter, Jennifer, was nowhere to be found in their humble Dickinson apartment. Her bedroom window ominously gaped open to the foreboding parking lot below. Every mother's worst fear had become a reality. Jennifer had vanished without a trace. Ellen's panicked cries alerted neighbors that a predator had invaded their community and ripped an innocent girl from her own home. Jennifer's life hung in limbo over the coming days as detectives fruitlessly searched for clues. Then a stroke of luck, a tiny voice crying out from a desolate field outside town, brought the first glimmer of hope. It was Jennifer, though her battered and bloodied body was almost unrecognizable. The degree of cruelty she endured defied belief, even for the most seasoned officers. With her throat slashed to the bone, stripped naked and discarded like trash, the rays of hope dimmed as Jennifer clung to life by gossamer threads. Yet even enveloped by cold horror, Jennifer's spirit could not be extinguished. Her fight reflected the courage lying dormant in all of us, the refusal to let evil claim victory no matter how savage its attack. Though just a child, Jennifer summoned a well of resilience over the coming years that transformed cruelty into redemption. Hers is a story of the depths of human depravity and the heights of the human spirit. A story that evokes justice while laying bare our capacity for empowerment in the face of devastation. Jennifer's childhood unfolded in the humble working town of Dickinson, Texas, where life moved to the slow rhythms of heat and humidity. The landscape offered little variation, just flat expanses of grassland flanked by industrial plants belching smoke along the Gulf Coast. Like many small towns, Dickinson's modest homes sheltered tight-knit communities that helped each other survive the blistering summers. Jennifer knew little of luxury in her 8 short years on Earth, but little mattered to a girl blessed with a fiery spirit and active imagination. She filled long days dreaming up fantastical stories beneath the Spanish moss dripping from broad oak limbs. Laughter echoed through the Schutt's tiny apartment as she spun tales of courage and adventure for her doting single mother, Ellen. At night, Ellen stroked her daughter's dark hair until she drifted to sleep, safe and content. But on the sticky night of August 9, 1990, the cloak of innocence sheltering Jennifer was ripped away without warning. Ellen had an early shift and needed rest, so she gently insisted Jennifer try falling asleep in her own room for once. After some rustling of sheets and whispered protests, her door finally fell silent. Ellen checked on her daughter one last time, watching the sheets slowly rise and fall for a moment in the dim light seeping from the window. A few hours later, Ellen awoke to prepare for work and poked her head in to rouse Jennifer. But the fragile peace had been shattered. Jennifer's sheets lay disturbingly undisturbed, the window ominously agape, her room empty. Ellen's cry of disbelief awoke the neighbors as the incomprehensible truth set in: someone had stolen her only light from right under their noses while the town slept. Details emerged in bits and pieces over the following days that began to paint pieces of the puzzle. Several witnesses had woken to screams around 1:30 a.m. but assumed it was just kids messing around. For once, the police were able to pull partial fingerprints from Jennifer's window as well as shoe prints from beneath, indicating an intruder had entered from outside. But other than faint tire marks, he left frustratingly little evidence behind. Without warning on the third day, a policeman burst into Jennifer's empty hospital room where Ellen kept a lonely vigil. Jennifer had been found dumped in a field just outside Dickinson, unconscious and savagely assaulted. The scene that met first responders was so grisly that firefighters fell to their knees sobbing at the sight of her broken body. Though no child should endure such brutality, the dark creature that took Jennifer spared no cruelty. Against all odds, Jennifer clung to life as she was airlifted to emergency surgery, though even the helicopter pilot wept openly en route. She had lost nearly half the blood in her tiny frame after the monster left her with a ragged 6-inch gash across her throat. Ugly ligature marks on her wrist spoke of cruel bindings as he dragged her fragile body through the rough field, discarding her like trash. Dirt and debris contaminated deep stab wounds that would leave her scarred for life. As the anesthetic wore off, the surgical team braced for screams or cries from the battered girl. But none pierced the heavy silence that descended upon Jennifer as she surfaced to consciousness. The creature had slashed deeper than her flesh. Her vocal cords lay severed by his vicious attack. Jennifer awoke mute and terrified, her voice stolen away as casually as her security was the night he crept through her bedroom window. She was alive by some miracle, but could she survive having her soul cleaved in two so ruthlessly? They had saved her body from the darkness, but could her spirit heal from wounds so raw they silenced her very cries? In the agonizing days after Jennifer's broken body was discovered, a feverish search for her attacker gripped Dickinson. The police poured all available resources into the investigation, but the mystery assailant left infuriatingly few tangible clues behind. Fresh out of Leeds, they turned in desperation to the only witness left, Jennifer herself. But how could they glean testimony from a child rendered mute by unthinkable violence? The answer came as Jen discovered a way to give voice to the secrets locked silently inside. Though unable to make a sound, she scribbled out the story of her abduction in shaky handwriting. Page by painstaking page, she described waking to large rough hands over her mouth dragging her from her own bed. Then being whisked into a car and driven to a nearby school. Jennifer even recalled clever details to aid police, like the smoking and beer cans littering the car. And a critical name uttered casually by her calm assailant, Dennis. Her writings revealed a disturbing portrait of a quick-thinking psychopath posing as a helpful policeman to keep her quiet during the drive. As skepticism over his story grew, fear mounted inside the small girl. But even then, her sharp intuition recorded telling observations about Dennis' appearance that would prove vital later. Armed with Jennifer's account, the police fruitlessly scoured the town and surrounding countryside for suspects. The case soon turned cold until advances in DNA evidence testing almost 20 years later would finally expose her abductor. But the long years between stole Jennifer's chance at childhood innocence. In the immediate aftermath, she descended into severe post-traumatic stress, battling irrational distrust and fear of nearly everyone, especially men. Her mother Ellen bore the brunt of explosive bursts of anger Jennifer couldn't vocalize except through flying objects and violent tantrums. Sleep held no safety after the night Dennis shredded her sense of security. Likewise, returning to school the next year proved traumatic when Jennifer flew into uncontrollable rages triggered by small, confining spaces like the portable classroom she was assigned. Well-meaning administrators separated her from other students for their safety at the expense of her own emerging social skills. Ironically, attempts to protect Jennifer from harm often isolated her further, feeding the complex PTSD wrought by Dennis' cruelty. While Jennifer struggled to find safe harbor in her own mind, the investigation floundered. Initial public outrage faded to background noise as months went by fruitlessly. And used evidence gathered dust while trail after trail died out. Turnover diluted the police roster as frustrated investigators threw up their hands. The only untarnished player was Jennifer herself. While others wavered, she held fast to visceral memories of Dennis and rock-solid commitment to identifying her demon. Her mother marveled at the iron-focused Jennifer brought to recurring interviews about traces of evidence recovered from the scene even years later. Ellen watched her blossom into a preternaturally gifted observer who outperformed trained officers during case reviews. Long after the misguided public decried Jennifer as damaged goods, she painstakingly rebuilt her identity as the toughest investigator nobody saw coming. Surpassing all doubt, Jennifer powered forward on sheer nerve through anxiety that silenced her voice to channel cold precision towards finding Dennis. She matured into the steel spine holding the languishing case together against all odds, quietly awaiting the chance to pierce the anonymity shielding Dennis for almost 19 years. Where others gave up, Jennifer settled in for the long game. The only missing player was science. But DNA technology was about to unlock everything. Science finally unlocked Jennifer's airtight memory years after Dennis Bradford thought he slipped the noose. DNA testing achieved exponential accuracy gains in the 2000s that cracked stubborn cold cases wide open across the country. Even decades-old samples long shelved in evidence rooms could yield revelations, breathing fresh hope into forgotten cases. No one was more poised to benefit from this breakthrough than a young woman still shadowed by childhood demons in Dickinson. Behind Jennifer's casual smile lurked an abiding rage known only to the mother forced to restrain violent tantrums triggered by mundane events. Yet undergirding periodic rage and terrifying panic attacks lay an emerging emotional maturity beyond Jennifer's 19 years. So when the call came that Detective Tim Cromie had been assigned to reignite her case, she received the news with disciplined optimism. His pledge to pursue Dennis with unrelenting dedication resonated with her methodical dedication built on hypervigilance from years battling PTSD. Jennifer immediately recognized a kindred spirit committed for the long haul no matter how many turns the road took. Together they convinced the FBI to prioritize testing evidence from her assault recovered from the crime scene almost 20 years prior. Dusty packaging hiding plastic bags containing debris-encrusted clothing and stained knives at last made their way to forensic labs. For 12 tense months Jennifer fought the familiar foe of impatience while Cromie weathered political foot-dragging from apathetic officials. Until one electrifying call shattered complacency on September 22, 2009 with 2 words, "We got him." Stunned silence erupted in explosive joy as the lab tech uttered a name Jennifer's gut knew but her conscious mind barely recalled, Dennis Bradford. Her tattered child's clothing had clung to far more than forensic debris. Embedded skin cells revealed the man who left Jennifer to die 19 years earlier. Excited probing of Dennis police records portrayed a predator still at large who fit Jennifer's descriptions perfectly. He had just been paroled months earlier, conveniently timed to intersect with Jennifer's childhood abduction. His previous convictions betraying violent attacks on helpless women aligned with the cruel attack she miraculously survived as a little girl. Dennis' smug freedom was short-lived as Cromie slapped cold metal cuffs around his wrists just days before the 19th anniversary of Jennifer's soul-scarring trauma. Her steely dedication had finally brought Dennis to bay after decades exploiting a flawed justice system. Jennifer was about to come face to face with the looming nightmare that haunted her for half a lifetime. In the courtroom, Jennifer found reality surreally distorted when she came eye to eye with Dennis at last. Under dim light filtering through barred windows, she discovered a broken man meeting her gaze. Gone was the hulking figure towering over her torn memories. Instead, a gaunt drug addict with sunken, desperate eyes sat slumped in stained clothes waiting judgment for half-forgotten sins. Pausing a long moment, she centered her thoughts before launching into painstakingly prepared words crafted over sleepless nights. Jennifer tapped depths of courage to give voice to 19 years of relentless hurt and terror flowing from one cruel night. Her statement laid bare the devastation one callous man chose to casually inflict by savaging the innocence and security of a tiny girl. Finally unburdening the full weight of anguish borne silently as a child infused Jennifer with liberation no bars could contain. She had been victimized, but now claimed victory on her own righteous terms. Yet justice has its own timeline, unmoved by human planning. On the precise August anniversary date Jennifer chose for Dennis' Day of Reckoning, she received numbing news he had taken the coward's route before facing accountability. Just days prior, Dennis was found swinging from a twisted bedsheet, a fitting end invented by his own hand rather than courageously confronting condemnation for grievous sins. Although denied the right to address her abuser directly before the law, Jennifer had the last say by reading her statement over Dennis' hastily dug grave instead. Her voice rang out clear and unfaltering over his remains. Though gone in body, some essence of Dennis would remain trapped behind those words echoing 6 feet under. Jennifer walked away cleanly free of shadows that had darkened so many days of her precious life. The light of resolution illuminated a new path filled with promise instead of pain at long last. A bittersweet mix of relief and grief washed over Jennifer after confronting Dennis Bradford's lifeless body. Savoring the closure his conviction could never fully provide came at the steep price of releasing anticipated emotional fury. She emerged from facing down her longtime tormentor unexpectedly deflated. The towering bogeyman still casting shadows from her darkest memories had withered pathetically right in front of her eyes. In the yawning absence left by achieving delayed justice, Jennifer felt directionless and empty for the first time. Her entire young life revolved around bringing Dennis to justice. With him gone, what came next? The answer took time, healing, and deep reflection to recognize. In facing trauma so violent it literally stole her voice, Jennifer reclaimed extraordinary power to transform savage violation into liberating redemption. Her inspiring story brought hope to other victims languishing in shame or defeatism. In the difficult months following Dennis' death, Jennifer came to understand true justice transcends legal punishment against one small man. Even homicide cases result more often in a silent void than resolution for suffering victims. Dennis would never comprehend the gift his despicable violation spawned, a fierce advocate blossoming from bloodied origins. Jennifer devoted her career to uplifting voices from those still trapped in pain's silent scream. She poured energy into counseling victims wrestling personal demons against invisible perpetrators. Many nights she stayed up into dawn hours sharing wisdom honed from her own arduous metamorphosis from mute terror to vocal powerhouse. Each small triumph lifting up a survivor's seeded future groundswell victories no single court case could catalyze alone. Jennifer spoke on national platforms spotlighting smart policing and forensic innovations that exponentially bettered outcomes like hers. Tirelessly educating students and cold case units on both preserving evidence and supporting victims kept her perpetually traveling, sharing strategies that might just awaken long dormant leads. She consistently credited science for her biggest breakthrough. Although DNA database expansions aided her case, technology marched forward even faster since. Jennifer advocated for broadened collection from felons that yielded incredible successes locating serial rapists and murderers still at large years later. She became a vocal proponent of familial match breakthroughs that apprehended elusive criminals even when their own DNA profile was absent from databases. Privately, Jennifer triumphed over heartbreaking odds, predicting she would die alone, bitter, and childless. As medical knowledge of violent rape's insidious consequences grew, her survivor's story offered fellow victims struggling to conceive better options and support. Demonstrating courageous transparency in discussing such intimate fallout from sexual assault forged bonds and spurred research benefiting millions worldwide. No one felt more shock when Jennifer herself first held a squalling baby girl nestled in her arms years later through a surrogate mother. Just this single victory bore sweet vindication against cruel injustice, telling victims they are forever broken or damaged. Where Jennifer had once seen only lonely dark years stretching ahead, new rays of light emerged in children carrying forward laughter's echoes temporarily silenced by a demon named Dennis. Jennifer's name became synonymous with the promised dwelling in even the most shattered victim. Against unthinkable odds, she transformed blind violation into piercing vision, exposing dark injustice to disinfecting sunlight. To call her just brave or strong drastically understates rare fearlessness learned only by journeying through terror towards wisdom waiting silently on the other side. Jennifer lit up the world wherever shadows still lurked. Hers was the least expected profile, concealing the greatest hidden reserve of power, ordinary human heart. Jennifer emerged from the depths of violence forever changed, though few could have predicted her transformation's stunning direction. Expectations limited someone so brutally stripped of innocence and voice. But the wounded little girl summoning superhuman courage just to crawl from that desolate field in search of rescue grew into an awe-inspiring force shining light where shadows fall. By sharing her survival story, Jennifer fostered space, allowing long-suppressed voices to surface at last. She walked with victims slowly rebuilding the capacity to name violation kept silent far too long. Many survivors described life-changing affirmation simply witnessing Jennifer model resolute strength digging deep soul roots blooming into powerful wings. Likewise, Jennifer watered seeds of human potential even in perpetrators by demonstrating grace as she reclaimed personal power. Through recognizing the poverty behind cruelty, she shifted the burden of darkness from victims onto oppressors for accountability and rehabilitation. Jennifer set the ethical standard high. Justice absent healing fueled endless reactionary cycles going nowhere. Even Dennis Bradford deserved opportunity to transform shadow aspects through nonviolent reconciliation before meeting his tragic, violent end. Yet Jennifer stood tallest as a towering example that when ordinary people summon extraordinary courage, they achieve feats labeled impossible. Despite being beaten down past the brink of death as a helpless child, Jennifer revived to dismantle systemic silence, shielding monsters like Dennis Bradford. Many still suffer trapped by trauma's smothering grip, keeping evil thriving under mask of anonymity. Jennifer proved no wound defines survivors unless they choose limitation. The light always remains inside for those daring to seek sparks lying dormant under thick ashes accrued through hardship after hardship. Let her blinding resilience stand as eternal testament that even the meekest spirit might discover their own dynamo. Jennifer ripped back the curtain on depravity so many wish to deny, yet kept peeling behind surface evil to expose freedom as the ever-present, overlooked alternative. Her story provides mirror and roadmap guiding people at risk of abandoning hope towards empowering redemption waiting patiently within reach. Where chains seem unbreakable, Jennifer reveals keys were held internally all along. Heroes walk among us disguised as victims waiting activation from compassion that unlocks courage to change everything.